your go-to resource for U.S. immigration insights. We provide clear immigration news and information. Our platform provides a network of licensed attorneys who can answer your questions and guide you through the process. From visas to green cards, asylums to citizenships, immigrationquestion.com helps you to network with immigration attorneys so that you can move forward with confidence. Sign up today or download the app. Free registration, limited time offer. Stay tuned. We go live in 30 seconds.
And welcome to this live webinar brought to you question.com, a networking platform and meeting ground where MLEs and licensed immigration are together to learn, exchange current on U.S. immigration. My name is GB Alson, Conditional Residency and I-751. Conditional permanent residency can feel, especially when a change ends, shift unexpectedly, or documents are difficult. The I-751 is detailed, implementation heavy, and clear by USCIS, leave little room for mistakes. Conditional residency work by how petitions are evaluated, critical, and moving forward with confidence. Through this important session, we are joined by Natalie Womack, as a Virginia-based immigration attorney, families and businesses navigating complex immigration matters. Her work includes strong focus on conditional residency and I-751 waivers with a thoughtful, detail-oriented approach to long-term immigration. Attorney Womack, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, before we begin, a quick note in immigrationquestion.com, public platform for creative education and discussion. Attorneys who participate independently, and the platform does not provide individualized guidance. Joining us from YouTube, LinkedIn, and other platforms who have not subscribed yet, now grab your. Let's get started. Let's start with Womack. Conditional can be confusing for many. What are the most important conditional residents must understand the period, and where do people most often make mistake at 751 filings?
Gotcha. Okay. I think that's a great question, and I'll take it two-part. First, the obligations, and then some of the mistakes, okay? So one of the biggest obligations is timing. So whenever you are in the process of, again, so we're setting the stage, you've found someone that you're so in love with, you've married them, you've petitioned, and you are under 2 years of being married. So then once you get married, you now file your application, your I-130, I-45, and you do all of that. And then you get approval, you get your work authorization, and now you're living life. But now, before that status ends, you need to make sure that you're filing the I-751. And that's very important because what this does is it takes the condition away from your conditional green card. Okay, so again, timing is important. You have to do it 90 days before the expiration of your current card. Okay, so if you make sure that you're doing it, then you get your information and your preparation together. That is perfect. So that is one of the obligations, and that's a very big key one. Okay, then the next one is dealing with making sure that if you take any move, if you make any moves with regards to your place of living, you need to fill out the AR-11. The AR-11 is on USCIS's website, and that basically tells USCIS, if you need to get in contact with me, here is my new place of residence, okay? So you have to be very, very mindful of that. There are horrible things that can happen if you don't do that, so it's very important. It sounds like a small detail, but it's actually huge in practice. So make sure that you're doing that. Also, if you get an RFE, which is a request for additional evidence, don't panic. What you do is you make sure that you find a competent attorney, you review your RFE, and you start your submissions. So that is basically the biggest obligation, is being basically situationally aware to the fact that you've tapped the federal government and that you have to do it on time, and that you have to be aware that you have obligations with regards to where you live and if they ask you more questions, okay? Now, one of the biggest mistakes, and I think it's a misnomer, and I think people stay in their head about certain things because they are thinking like, oh, I can't do this or I can't do this. And I do the same thing with regards to certain aspects in my life. You will be concerned and worried that you never actually open your mouth and voice what the issue is. One of the biggest issues that I see or mistakes that individuals have here is if their marriage is on a decline or if they're no longer together or if there is a divorce. They think, well, I can't file an I-751. Everything is, it's for nothing now. And that is the exact thing that you should not think. Okay. So that's a mistake it's a rational thought, but it is irrational when you're dealing with the law, because what they want to know is at the time of the inception of the marriage, meaning at the time that you entered the marriage, if it was a true and valid marriage. Okay. And if it's a true and valid marriage, here's all the proof to show. And then if we're still in this marriage, then we're going to show our continued life together. But you have to understand, USCIS understands that life happens. Marriages are hard. Not even talking about immigration status, right? Marriages are hard. You're joining two lives together. So they understand that sometimes it doesn't always work. And another mistake is thinking that, oh, well, we're not together or we're divorced, I'm going to still do a joint filing. No, that is misrepresentation to the government. Do not do that. Okay. What you need to do is be situationally aware to your circumstances and apply the correct way. You would be applying with a waiver. And I think another thing is that making sure that the information that you're submitting is not weak. That's another mistake. You will think, well, I'm just going to submit what I submitted at first. No, this is a continued process, just like a marriage is a life of its own. They want to see new and updated information. Individuals stop keeping that information, basically the chronology of their life, because they're like, oh, I applied. Nope, you need to keep that information going, and that information needs to show on a rolling status for when you resubmit. So those are the basic things, your obligations and what your mistakes are.
Now, joint I-751 waivers are increasingly necessary. Most frequently leads to waiver jointly.
Okay. All right. So I think this is an excellent question. And what the premise that I like, and I used to teach at a career college, and one of the biggest things that I'd always like to tell my students and to tell everyone is, if you think about it in common sense, then the law will kind of layer over it. Okay. So the common sense of it is that life happens. Okay. When you get married to someone, again, you're thinking, it's roses, it's amazing, it's awesome, but life happens, right? Now, if someone in the marriage does something where you're now no longer together, right, then that could result in an annulment. An annulment means that the marriage never happened. Okay. It could result in a divorce. And that means that the marriage is dissolved. And the whole premise of how you're submitting to USCIS is on this marriage, right? Again, there could also be an instance where the U.S. citizen's spouse is abusing the immigrant spouse. All of those situations that could happen in life, the law allows for with waivers. Okay. So if you cannot petition jointly with your significant other, meaning that life is not going the way that you had intended when you first set out on this marriage, you've had different life circumstances happen where you're not together or there's problems in the marriage, that is when the waiver steps in. The law realizes, again, that life happens and marriage is a very serious and a hard process. It's not always as simple as the romance novels would like you to think that it is. So you can also still apply. So don't think that life is over, you're unable to apply. You can apply and have success, just with the right evidence.
Now, for I-751 waiver filings or extreme hardship, how does USCIS credibility and evidence tends to carry the most weight?
Exactly. Okay. I think, again, Again, it's so important to put yourself in the reasonableness standpoint. I almost think about it as if like I have a group of girlfriends, right? I don't have a lot, but let's say I have a couple of girlfriends and you're telling them your scenario and your situation, right? You're like, girl, I got married, this happened, this, right? Now, does it meet the sniff test? Right? So now you're telling me that you got married, you applied for a US benefit, and now you're no longer together. Okay? So now, if you're now asking me for a huge benefit as a result of this marriage, it has to meet the reasonableness test and the sniff test, like from a group of girlfriends, a group of guys who are your friends, and they're basically checking to say, does that make sense? Okay, so how you make sure that that makes sense is you go back to the inception of the marriage, the very beginning of the marriage, and you make sure that the evidence that you submitted to show that your marriage was true and valid, you are showing that again. You're basically saying like, look, I understand that life happens, but at this moment, in this very moment, this was a true entrance into a marriage, and we were trying to do this for the forever, right? So that means you're showing your joint taxes, you're showing your joint bank accounts. If you have a mortgage together, a joint lease, all that information is very huge, okay? Because it shows in the inception. As it goes on, you're probably not going to be able to show that information, but that is when your affidavit, basically your chronology of what has happened in your marriage, starts to reflect your paperwork. So again, it has to make sense. Your timeline can't be off. You can't say we were no longer together and then you have stronger evidence when you're not together, right? Then you'd be like, well, I'm confused. That sounds as though you're trying to basically paint me a picture that doesn't exist. And if you didn't let them know. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're doing everything above board and you're being honest. And when you're being honest, you're doing it in the correct way. That's why it's very important to have an attorney, because you want to make sure that the chronology of the evidence that you're submitting, your affidavit, and all of the evidence that you're presenting all makes sense. And that's what USCIS is looking for. They're looking to make sure. Now, if I go back in time and look at the evidence when they entered into this relationship, does it look like it was true and honest? Okay, it does. Now they're saying there's a breakup here. Now I don't see as much information. Does the timeline of when they say their breakup happens start showing that their bank account started to be split? Right? So it has to make sense. She's no longer on the insurance. He's no longer on the insurance. Things have to make sense. So that's the biggest thing they're looking for. Think of it as someone, they're not judging whether or not you can keep a marriage together, right? They're judging whether or not you entered into this marriage with good intentions when you're now dealing with waivers. And also just know the same thing exists if you're dealing with VAWA. So VAWA is if there's any form of financial, physical, or financial abuse towards the immigrant spouse. Then immigrant spouse can petition and do a self-petition for themselves under the Violence Against Women's Act. And that allows you to self-petition. But you can't self-petition without evidence. You're going to have to show that there was some form of abuse. And if there is some form of abuse, you're looking to have basically what I think of it all the time is a third-party corroboration, right? You have a police report. You have incidents where maybe you have an affidavit from family members or friends who have seen or heard various things in your life, right? Then maybe if you've gone to a therapist or someone that you're going to work through this, then they would corroborate the things that are going on in your life. But again, that third party corroboration for any form of abuse is very essential. So those are the things that USCIS is looking for. You just can't say a thing. You have to say the thing and support it as strong and with sound legal evidence. It is very, very important that you do that and make sure it's layered.
All right. Processing times are common. How to handle expired green card extension notices and travel or employment concerns while an I-751 remains pending?
So yes. So the biggest thing is realizing our reality right now. Okay. So things are going to happen with regards to delays. So a lot of times I have individuals who contact me because they're worried, oh my goodness, it's delayed. Expect a delay. Okay. Expect a delay, expect an interview, expect harder vetting, right? So when you expect these things, then you can be properly prepared. One of the things to be properly prepared is realizing that one, you need to make sure that you apply for your I-751 90 days before your expiration. If you're on the waiver track, you may have an exception or an exemption for doing that because your situation, you're potentially going through abuse. You may have hospital visits. You may have issues where you can't live with your significant other because you're not even thinking about that world. Okay. So they understand that, again, life happens, but how you do prepare, again, filing that I-751, knowing that once you filed your I-751, your employment authorization and your authorization to travel, if you asked for it, okay, so be very mindful, not everyone does the I-131. Okay, so that's very important. If you have that authorization and if you have that ability to travel, it will be extended. Now, for my clients, I tell them, if you have something pending with USCIS, I prefer that you not go anywhere. That's just right now. And that is dealing with the reality of where we are. And the reason for that is I would not want you to travel internationally. And again, this is dealing with international travel. I would not want you to travel internationally, try to come back in, and your case has been adjudicated. Now, I can't get you back in, right? And now with regards to fighting to get back in, it's going to be harder. If in fact you do want to travel, what will allow you to travel, even if your work authorization, your travel documentation has expired and it looks on, on everything that it looks as though it's expired, you would take your expired information, your green card, everything that you have to show that you had status, coupled with your I-797 receipt notice. Okay. So the combination of those two things would allow you to work and would allow you to travel. So those are the things that you would present to individuals who are asking you, why should we let you back in? Why should we allow you to work? The combination of those two documents, that should provide you with the information that you need. But just be mindful. If you're traveling while your status is pending, there is a potential that it could be denied while you're outside of the country. So just be very mindful of that.
USCIS interviews for us appear to be increasing. What should students realistically expect from interviews, and how can they without being overwhelmed?
Okay. So again, another great question. And again, let's deal with reality. The reality is you will have an interview. Some people are like, oh, I'm not going to have an interview. Just put in your head, you will have an interview so you can start prepping. Now, in 2020, I had a couple clients, I think it was like, they did not have an interview. But when I say that we sent in a strong package, I think I sent it in and I was like, I dare you to say no, right? So you have to have a strong package when you're presenting. But right now, just assume that you're going to have an interview. So if you're in the assumed process of saying, I'm going to have an interview, let's deal with the logistics, right? If you know that you have an interview, make sure that that day is set for the interview. Don't try to multitask and do a whole bunch of things. Don't do that. Have everything ready. Your day is set for the interview. You want to be on time. You want to travel light. Make sure that you have all of the originals that you submitted copies of when you submitted it to USCIS. So if someone wants to see it, you can flip to it and hand it to them. So just be mindful that individuals, the immigration officer will ask you questions. They will ask you for information. But the premise and what you always want to know is the relationship that you've entered into is true. It is your truth. Stand in your truth and answer the questions truthfully. You're not going to know everything. You're going to potentially feel, a little stumbled about something because you are being interviewed by the federal government. It is not a simple process, but you are prepared. Okay. Also know that when you're going through the motion detectors, don't wear bulky jewelry. Like I would never wear this if I were going for an interview. No way. No way. It would be very light because you don't want those nerves, right? So you think about about the logistics of that. Once you're in the room, they're going to ask you interview. They're going to ask you questions that is going to be a substance with regards to what you have submitted. So with my clients, we go over the information that has been submitted. You go through those questions with regards to, have you ever done this? Have you ever been associated with? Make sure you're answering them truthfully and honestly. Okay. So that is one of the biggest aspects of going for your interview. Be ready logistically and as well as substantively. That is absolutely huge. And be honest and try. I can say to be calm, but you're not going to be calm, but work to be calm. And those are my
Now,
main
looking
tips.
ahead to, thank you. Now, looking to 2026, what practical steps can conditional residents take now, I-751 filings, at the risk of denial or prolonged review?
So again, I think operate in your reality, right, of where we are right now. Don't so much worry about time, okay? Because time is not going to move fast in this process. And I think you're doing yourself a disservice saying that, oh, they haven't responded to me. They're going to be slower right now, okay? Another aspect is once you submit your paperwork, just like your marriage is not over, this is something that lives and continues to live. You keep your paperwork continuously moving. So as your life moves, so should your paperwork. Oh, we got a new apartment. Oh, we're buying a house. We went and we started looking at plans with this builder. Here are some of the plans for our potential home that we plan to build next February, right? Like these are the things that life is happening. You have information where you looked at schools for your kids. You're thinking about putting them in this school. You're actually doing these steps. I'm involved in this community group. Now, mind you, also be very mindful what communities and groups you associate with. That's very important, as well as don't empty or just not think about what you're liking on social media. All of that information, it counts. Okay. So that's very important. Making sure that your digital footprint matches up with the intentional information that you have sent to USCIS. Okay. If you are now submitting your information for marriage, you should not have any sites dealing with dating. That's a no-no, right? So you have to make sure everything is paralleling. So it means basically getting your life in order, keeping your life in order, keeping records of your life so that when it comes down to submitting your information, you do it with ease and not with stress. Okay. And also another aspect is, I know sometimes, when you're dealing with marriage, not everybody wants to have joint accounts. Not everybody wants to have joint because individuals like individual aspects. That is fine if you're not dealing with immigration. Okay. And there's a way that you can actually still have joint, but still separate. But you need to make sure that you're working to show that you are physically, emotionally, and financially joined. Don't stop that process. I see too many couples who will stop and then that's it. And then they have nothing else to show. They've shown no new movement. I need to see a new account, a new authorization, a new credit card with that authorization, something that's showing that your life is developing together. And it wasn't just for show.
Thank you for those insights. Everyone joining us live, conditional residency filings, careful preparation, thoughtful documentation, and a clear understanding of petitions are reviewed. Staying informed can make a mess during this stage of the immigration process. Welcome. ImmigrationQuestion.com is a networking platform where immigration-related questions at no cost and engage directly with participating attorneys. We're also proud to share that ImmigrationQuestion.com is triple B-rated, reflecting our commitment to transparency, accountability, and community education. Now, based on your experience, how do platforms like help conditional residents better understand filing requirements and approach the 751 process more thoughtfully?
Right. So I think even just today is a blessing, right? Like it's amazing to have the ability to, one, have information given to you for free, right? That's the top thing, right? Then on top of that, you can ask a question, like the question that like is burning in your soul or you're staying in your head about, you can actually give it to someone who are immigration professionals, right? So I think that that is essential, right? So for immigration question and that aspect and that resource for individuals, I'm happy that this exists. I think it's been about it's been maybe almost like 9 months to maybe a year that I've encountered immigration question, and I think it's amazing. I tell my clients about it because I think it's an exceptional way of being able to ask another question. Maybe you don't want to ask me a question, but I try to make sure that my clients feel exceptionally comfortable with asking me whatever they need to, but it's almost like a way of anonymously asking, and you just get a quick answer. So I think it's phenomenal. I love immigration question.
Thank you for that insight, Attorney. Before we final question, for conditional residents who are unsure whether to file or request a waiver, what early warning signs should prompt them and reassess their approach?
So I think the biggest aspect is, one, having open communication with your spouse, right? But again, marriage is dealing with two separate people, and not even dealing with the immigration issue can be hard. But if you're noticing that there's a problem, that is like a red ding, 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 contact an attorney fast, okay? Because you don't want to have the RFE come in if you didn't have an attorney when you filed, which you should, especially now, but you don't want the RFE to come in and you sit there and you wait and you do not contact an attorney, because the attorney is going to be, one, pressed against a deadline to get the information in for you, as well as trying to figure out what you already submitted, right? So when you notice that there is a problem, when there is a breakdown in the marriage, you really work to try to talk to your spouse. If you can't talk to your spouse, then you need to contact an immigration attorney, because what I do in that situation is we assess where you are, we assess where your marriage is, and I say, listen, I'm not working to be your marriage counselor, okay? Now, if you want marriage counseling, I think you should definitely do that. But I am here to advise you on the legal aspect of your filing based on your marriage. Here are the things that you need to start gathering from me. If you see that they start becoming a problem, then I need you to work to start gathering these things, because I have two forms of potential proof. A joint filing where everything is how it should be, or either I'm showing a dissolution of the marriage so I can show USCIS that there has slowly been a breakdown in that communication, in that marriage, and it's reflecting in their paperwork. And again, seeing what they filed before, if they didn't use me, is essential. So again, having those conversations with a legal professional, and there are legal professionals who will start working with you and talking to you. So don't stay caught up in your head or in a bad situation, because it will get worse.
If you've just joined working with Attorney Esquire on conditional residence waiver strategies, I-751. We are now moving into our live Q&A session. This is your opportunity to directly to a licensed immigration attorney. Drop your questions in the chat or call us live at 703-3483 and we'll do as possible. My 2-year conditional green card will in 6 months. How early can I file I-751 to remove the conditions?
Now, okay? So, all right, so you start getting your paperwork together, right? So you would have already been gathering your information. You would still be in your information process gathering, right? Then 3 months into that, or 3 months right before it's about to expire, then you're going to want to make sure that it's in the mail. I would do it just a little bit ahead of that. So I would get with an attorney as soon as possible, because you want to make sure that your evidence, you're not scrambling to get it to meet the deadline, right? You want to make sure that you're getting it so that you have it in on time. So definitely start working now, but submit when you're 3 months away from your expiration date.
All right. Our marriage is real, but we have no bank account. Will photos and lease be enough?
So I hear that, but I would want you to get, if you're my client, I would be asking you, why can't we get a joint bank account? Why can't we get something that's joint? Okay. Photos are great. A lease is great. But hear me, anyone can stand there and take a photo, right? That doesn't mean anything, right? But here's how, when things truly mean something to USCIS, okay? Like if I'm in a relationship with someone, or I start talking to someone, and it's like, oh, how you doing? How you doing? And the minute they say, can you give me $100? I'm like, what? Okay. Can you lend me? Can I have your bank card? What? Okay. Those things are not places where the average person should be, right? USCIS says we've stepped over a threshold when I as another person to you can get into your money, I can get into your bank account, I can have access to you more than the average person. So now when someone says, can I get $100? It's different, okay? Because that's your significant other, right? So think about it in that sense. Now you say no joint bank accounts. If there is concern about merging your money, here's what I suggest you do. You still have a joint account. You can still have your individual accounts, okay? Still have your individual accounts, his account, her account, right? But then you have a joint account where you do your life things together. It can't just be a joint account in name only. There has to be activity, has to be monthly activity, okay? So the photos can work, a lease can work, and your other information can work. But there is nothing like when you show that someone has access to your money. That is a huge thing that USCIS is looking at.
All right. Will USCIS do you for I-751 questions? What questions they ask usually?
Okay, so for the I-751, I don't think that they will do an interview. Okay, again, I realize my reality. You never say never. I understand this administration can do some things that are a little bit different, but I would not be looking for an interview here. Okay, the only thing that I would be looking for here is you would have to submit your packet to remove your conditions, and then you may get an RFE. Okay, your RFE, again, and that's a request for additional evidence. And that's just saying that, yes, we've received what you submitted, but we still have some more questions. And when they say, but we still have some more questions, you need to make sure that those questions are answered effectively and appropriately. That's the reason why those RFEs are very important, because it's saying like, we could deny you. Here's the reason we might. So you need to make sure that that information is very sound. And some of the things that they may ask for is, for instance, just like the question with Bashir, he had with regards to not having the joint accounts. Okay. So if you got an RFE, hopefully you would not, but if you got an RFE, they would say, can you please provide me information showing joint financial connections with your spouse, right? So if I didn't have a joint account, then I'd be trying to show that we had insurance together, that there was different things that showed that there was a financial connection to one another. So that's what additional evidence or additional questions will look like. It'll come in the form of an RFE, a request for additional evidence.
And I live in different states because of our jobs. Will USCIS think a mistake?
So, no, I don't think they will automatically think that it's fake, but I put it to my clients this way. You know how the criminal system is the presumption of innocent until proven guilty, right? I think it's the same way with immigration and how I work is it is assumed that it is a fraudulent marriage until you prove otherwise. Okay? So when you're submitting your information and you're layering it to prove that this is not a fake marriage. Okay? The fact that you do not live in the same household starts me being unable to put that layer there. And when I can't put that layer there, antennas are going to go up and they're going to say, why don't you live in the same state and why don't you live in the same house? But that does not mean everything. What it means is that we have something that we need to double down and prove. So if you didn't live in the same state, I would then I would come to you and ask you, okay, what's the scenario of why you're living in different states? If you tell me, oh, you know what, maybe this job here is only in this location and the amount of money that I can get here is different than any other state. Now we're going to go through and we're going to get cost projections of housing, how cost of living in the area, the amount that you obtain from this type of job in this state versus this state. Then we're going to make sure that we're showing a joint income. And then at that point, I not only want to show a joint income, I want to show a joint goal. I want to show maybe you have a contract to build a home, right? I want to make it make sense because the first thing that it will be a red flag when I can't put that layer, right? But even though I know that I can't put that layer, I'm going to try to figure out how do I now get them to understand why you're not living in the same state. But it has to be substantial proof. Because for me, if you're married and you're not living in the same household, not even talking about immigration, right? People will judge, well, what kind of marriage do you have? Is it a strong marriage? Is it a sound marriage? And that's not even dealing with immigration. Okay, so it will be a red flag. You would just have to prove away the red flag. So you can actually, even though you don't have a sound layer, you can justify why the layer is not there.
All right. Form I-751 jointly or apply for waiver, and which one will faster?
Okay, so faster, don't even think about that word. It's not an option. Time and speed, let that just happen. Okay, so there's not a faster or slower. Okay, now it is very important whether or not you do it jointly or whether or not you're doing it with a waiver, because if there is some form of proof that is out there that you guys are not married anymore and you submit jointly and don't tell USCIS, that gives them a reason to deny you. It gives them a reason to look at you funny. Okay, so let's say if you do a joint filing, yes, we're together, and then they do a search of databases, right? And now they see that, you're on a dating site. This happened a couple of months ago, right? Then what if they check your Facebook account? You're standing there with another female or male. Okay, so all these things matter, right? So your truth is always the premise that you stand on. Okay, so you're not worrying. Your goal is not to apply always for success. Of course, we want that to be the end goal, right? But in your applying, you need to apply in your truth so that you have success. It's a different mental state, right? So when you're doing that, that means being honest. Hey, we're having some problems. We're trying to work through it. I even had a couple who was married, got divorced, and got married again, right? But most people would say like, oh my goodness, too much, right? But for me, I take the spin of they are truly invested in each other and didn't want to give up, right? So I also look at it as, individuals who are going through this process, you are living your life. You're basically authoring your own love story, right? The only thing that I get to do is write it for you. So you have to make sure what you're doing when you're authoring this makes sense. So then when I set it to a chronological pattern, it makes sense and it makes USCIS see, yes, this is in fact a valid marriage. Even if you don't have a joint account, we figure that out. Even if you don't live in the same house, we figure that out. But we don't act as though it's not an issue. It is an issue. It's a red flag.
Right. What is good evidence for joint filing between bank photos and kids' birth
Okay,
certificates?
so all of those are exceptional. Okay. One of the biggest things and joys that I think is the birth certificates of your children, right? Like, I love kids, and I think anyone who is, looking at that paperwork and has a heart, they're like, oh, they have kids together. You don't just have kids with someone and go through this life connection for 18 plus years, right? That is the biggest commitment that there is. Even if the marriage doesn't last, I have to deal with you, right? So I think the birth certificates are excellent. Okay. The photos I think are excellent as well. Well, let me go in order. So birth certificates I think are top, right? The next one is financial information. Your financial information I think is so important. Because if you really think about it, if someone walks up to you and asks you for money or asks you if they can see your bank account, your first thought is like, how dare you, right? Now, if you change that person to being a friend and they ask you, you dial down a little bit, right? Now, if it's your significant other and USCIS is saying they asked you for that and you said no, why? Are you not invested? So you need to prove to them that you are fully invested. And one of the biggest processes will be financial. Okay. And that's something you get on the account, you work to do, and you show activity. You just can't have name only. You have to show that account activity. That's very important. Some people just throw a bank statement down. I'm like, I got to know this is you. I have to know this is her. I have to know that this is you living your life. This needs to be a monthly dance that I see you guys doing, right? Then the next thing would be leases. I think a lease or a mortgage, exceptional because you're living together, right? Now, I would also show mail coming to the house, packages coming to the house, showing that you are connected and that you're living in this home together. The photos are also important, but the photos you have to be careful about. You don't want to submit photos because and I had a client, she was like, oh, I love how we look in this. And I'm like, yeah, but here's the thing, right? Like, you see this, but I see this, right, as your practitioner. So even though you may look good in the photo, this may be a great moment, you want to make sure that your photos are basically telling a story. And they can't just be you and the person standing here every single time in the same location all the time. Because then the question is, did you just take 5 pictures and change your clothes? Right? They have to show your interaction of life, right? Like looking in your family room and seeing everybody playing a game during Christmas. That is a better picture than just you sitting here, right? Because anyone can do that. But life activity, life happening together, that's beautiful. You're going on a trip together. You're doing this together. Those types of photos, that's what counts. Photos in name only, a lease and bank information in name only doesn't do it. Those birth certificates, those are prime. Like that alone says a lot. So that would be kind of like my order.
Right. Now, Attorney Womack, a federal judge blocked the Trump administration from ending protected status for thousands of Syrians. How should immigrants interpret developments like this? And what does it reveal about how status-related protection?
Thank you. Okay, so I apologize. Can you read the last part of how? I missed that last part.
Right. So how should immigrants interpret developments? What does it reveal about how decisions can impact elections?
Perfect. Okay. So I know everybody is watching this, and I think it's important that everyone stay very informed. The biggest thing with TPS is knowing exactly what it is. It is temporary protected status. Okay. Knowing the reality, realizing the reality of where you are in this administration, you understand that they've specifically said that they are working to take away TPS. They're looking at all the various country conditions to determine whether or not they think that it's still in the US's best interest to offer and provide the temporary protected status. Okay. Now, always in being here, if you have temporary protected status, but your goal is to be here as a U.S. citizen, then you have to look at what alternatives that you may have. Okay. So in looking at some of the alternatives and what you may have is potentially maybe the marriage-based package that we're talking about now. It may be marriage-based. It may be maybe if you just wanted to stay a little bit longer because you wanted to do a student visa, you could do a student visa. There's various forms of visa that you may be able to transfer to. So if you're here on temporary protected status, not even if it's like you have an extension or if it's going away, no matter what, you should always be looking at that as a potential, always being abreast of what is happening. That's one of the reasons why immigration question is great, because you can think, well, maybe this may be an option, or maybe this may be a possibility. Stay self-aware, stay self-informed so that you can figure out if you wanted to make a move with regards to your status, you could. Okay. So that's one of the biggest things. Also know that a lot of this, of course, all of this is political in nature, is dealing with the politics of another country, is dealing with the politics of our country, the country conditions of another country. It is all temporary. So if you know that it's temporary, your whole goal and ideal is to work to how to make that permanent. For my clients that I know that they are on TPS, what we started doing is to developing a package, okay? And part of that package is getting information in line to show that you have been in the US for either 5 years or 10 years, and you've had continuous presence, that you have good moral character, and that you have a US citizen that would be harmed. And the reason why I say this information is that everyone should keep, especially if you're in TPS status, is because this allows you a defense if ever you're in removal proceedings. So always, as an immigrant here, you keep your paperwork together so that if an event happens, meaning you need to do a filing, all right, or maybe there is an issue with immigration court, you're armed and ready calmly rather than reacting to the situation. So if you keep that information together and you know that you're temporary, you know that you're filing, you're dealing with USCIS, you will easily be able to give it over to your attorney and be able to provide it. So again, the biggest thing is stay situationally aware, socially aware, know what is going on. And even with these court hearings, you notice that one thing can change the status, right? No one wants to live that that uncertain way, right? You don't want to live that way. But if you are, be situationally aware to that and start looking for yourself. How can you make it permanent? Start having conversations. Start talking to an immigration attorney. Know the various aspects of your life. Because I can be talking to a client, they will tell me something. I'm like, tell me more about that. Even though I know you want to talk about this, I think your true path to citizenship may be that. So start having those conversations.
Thank you so much, Attorney Natalie Womack, for sharing your time today. Your perspective helps bring clarity to a process can feel overwhelming for many conditional residents. To everyone watching, thank you for today's webinar. We hope this better understand I-751 filing strategies and the importance of careful preparation. You can also always visit immigrationquestion.com to ask immigration-related questions and stay informed about upcoming discussions. Visit today's session, share with others. The full replay available soon on Spotify. Just talk by immigrationquestion.com. Join us for another live session covering key immigration updates and practical guidance. Thank you again, Attorney Womack, for watching. Until next time, stay informed and stay connected.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye-bye.